Welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Education, SOA, Master's Degree Programs, Master of Arts, Distance Education, MADE, First Year. MDE 411 Growth and Philosophy of Distance Education. Block 5 Growth and Innovations. Unit 5, Open and Distance Education as Social Practice. Rigmore George, 1995. Editor's note, this paper explores distance education as social practice by drawing on theories of communication and sociolinguistics. Language is fundamental to all social situations including open and distance educational contexts. It is through language that teachers construct texts which indicate student learning intentions, and it is through language that students reconstruct these intended meanings and give expression to them. The paper argues that success of an open or distance education teacher or student is dependent on expertise in the linguistic demands of the educational context. Though some of these demands are common with traditional forms of education, open and distance context add another level of complexity. In particular, the paper advocates a consideration of discourses as fundamental. Introduction. All those involved in teaching and learning are fundamentally concerned with language. Though the primary focus is on the ideas promoted in the teaching, learning situations, the fact is that these ideas are mediated through language. It is through language that personal understanding of worlds, including the world of open and distance education, are built, and through language that this understanding is expressed. This paper draws particularly on the theoretical frameworks of communication and sociolinguistics to explore the language of open and distance education contexts. In keeping with these fields of study, the word text is used to mean any continuous piece of language, either spoken or written, that is meaningful. In this context, these texts include the spoken and written language which constitute the activities of teaching and learning in open and distance education. The position taken is that education fundamentally involves the production and interpretation of particular kinds of text by teachers and learners, Kress 1985. p.5. The settings of open and distance education share some of these texts with conventional education, but they also give rise to certain other kinds of texts which make specific demands on both teachers and learners. This paper explores how these texts are produced and interpreted. It establishes the essential position of language in all social practice, specifically open and distance education. Being able to function in social situations, such as educational contexts, requires intimacy with complex social and cultural perspectives as well as a range of personal language resources. Central to this consideration is that language is not neutral. All texts, either overtly or covertly, present particular value positions. Educational texts are particularly problematic because they have a role in the distribution of wealth and power in society through the attainment of academic qualifications. To some extent, the justification for open and distance education is in the greater access that this mode provides to the social benefits of education. Because of the central role language plays in educational settings, the success of learners, with its wider social implications, is determined to a significant extent on expertise in the production and interpretation of the forms of language which are used in educational settings. For those involved in open and distance education, the focus is on the texts specific to these settings. Language as social practice. One of the most difficult things about the study of language is that in most instances it is invisible. The impact that language has in a social situation is generally not acknowledged. The focus is generally on the actions that the language accompanies, or on the ideas generated, rather than the role the language itself plays in the situation. In this paper, the language itself is drawn into the center of the discussion because of the integral part language plays in all social situations. It is inextricably entwined with social life so that participation in all aspects of society is dependent on language in a fundamental way. It is not just that language accompanies social action. It is integral to it. Indeed, Kress, 1985, page 4, considers there to be total connectedness between linguistic and social processes. Fairclough elaborates the point. Language is a part of society, linguistic phenomena are social phenomena of a special sort, and social phenomena are, in part, linguistic phenomena. Linguistic phenomena are social in the sense that whenever people speak or listen to or write or read, they do so in ways which are determined socially and have social effects. Social phenomena are linguistic, on the other hand, in the sense that the language activity which goes on in social contexts, as all language activity does, is not merely a reflection or expression of social processes and practices, it is part of those processes and practices. 1989, page point 23. The point Fairclough is making is that language is not a tool which is apart from the social activity, it is a part of it in a fundamental way. As well as shaping the social situation, it is shaped by it. Particular words do not simply achieve specific social ends in an instrumental way, the social situation shapes the very forms of language used. The inescapable implication of this is that in the consideration of a social practice such as education, or in this case specifically open and distance education, there needs to be a focus on the language of that situation. Communication. Communication is a fundamental concept in educational practice. General educational contexts use a range of language experiences to convey meaning. These include various face-to-face experiences including lectures and tutorials as well as mediated forms such as film and written texts in various forms. Within open and distance education, the potential range of textual experiences is narrowed because of the non-contiguous context. There is a significant dependence on written language, with audio and videotapes also being important teaching resources. In addition, telephone contacts, either conferencing or individual encounters, are also common experiences. There is also occasional use of visual forms by way of diagrams. Semiotic school of thought on communication. Because communication is such a fundamental aspect of teaching and learning, we will now focus on one way of understanding the communication processes operating. Fisk, 1990, page point 2, outlines the semiotic, from the word for sign, school of thought which presents communication as the production and exchange of meanings. He claims, it is concerned with how messages, or texts, interact with people in order to produce meanings. That is, it is concerned with the role of texts in culture. It uses terms like signification, and does not consider misunderstandings to be evidence of communication failure. They may result from cultural differences between sender and receiver. For this school, the study of communication is the study of text and culture. To understand communication in this way has important implications in educational contexts because it affects the role students and teacher play as the generators and interpreters of texts. According to the process school, the message originates with the sender and is transmitted to the receiver. Communication is said to occur when the message sent is the one received. When the message sent is not the same as the one received, communication is considered to have failed. In the semiotic school, the emphasis is on creating meaning rather than sending message. The sender creates meaning about an aspect of external reality by drawing on personal experiences and understandings, and expresses this meaning through text in the form of sounds or writing. The receiver, creates meaning about the external reality through interaction among the signs of the text, spoken and or written, provided by the sender, mediated by her personal experiences and understandings. From this perspective, meaning is not a static entity. Rather, it is negotiated. People from various backgrounds or at different stages of their lives will gain a different message from the same text because of the different perspectives they bring. This is not seen as a failure to communicate. Instead, it is an acknowledgement that communication is fundamentally linked to cultural and social contexts. Because the interpretation of a text is dependent as much on the reader's, hearer's individual, social and cultural experiences as the text itself, participants who share social and cultural contexts and other texts are likely to create similar meanings through the interaction. Where these aspects are not shared to such an extent, large differences will become apparent. Fisk, 1990, page 4, offers the following diagram as a representation of communication. Look at the screen. In this diagram, the basic elements are the sign, the message, the thing, which the sign refers to, the referent, and the users of the sign. Whether producing or reading a sign, meaning is made in the same way. It occurs within an individual, by the interaction of that individual's personal background with the text. Signs depend on the users of the sign recognizing them as having a particular meaning. For example, it was important for us at the beginning of this paper to be clear about the meaning of the sign, word, text, because there are a number of ways to understand this word. Without a shared meaning of this, our discussion could have been at cross purposes. The value of the semiotic perspective is that it locates the issues of communication in society and not in the technical aspect of the process, Fisk 1990, page 190. Communication through language is, therefore, not just about knowing particular words or even the specific meanings of those words. It is about the personal construction and reconstruction of meanings in a specific social setting of a culture. Participants need to draw on cultural and social knowledge, including the relationship between particular language forms and specific situations, as well as their previous textual history. Christie 1987, page 24. The semiotic approach offers a particularly rich way of understanding language in educational settings, including open and distance education situations. This paper, therefore, draws on the theories of the semiotic school in considering communication in educational settings. Communication in open and distance education. If we apply the semiotic school's view of communication to open and distance education, we understand the teaching-learning processes to be concerned with the construction and reconstruction of meanings in non-contiguous educational settings. Within a particular field of study, the significant issues are the social and cultural backgrounds of the participants, and the assumptions that can be made about the learner's knowledge of, or access to, other relevant texts. These issues include those common to all educational encounters, such as the appropriateness of using Western educational programs in cross-cultural situations, the implications for the range of socioeconomic groups in our society, and the consequences of students coming to meanings of a text which are different from those intended. What are the life experiences, values, and understandings that are assumed in the text? Do some sections of the community have greater access to this kind of knowledge and understanding? Do the activities and other learning devices which activate learning draw on a wide range of gender, race, and class experiences? Without such anchors on which to ground their learning, students' learning experiences will be less than satisfactory, and some will be at risk of failure. In addition to these more general considerations, there are issues specific to open and distance education which arise because of the individualized nature of the learning arrangements. There are three in particular that we will consider at this point. Firstly, in open and distance education, students are not present, perhaps not even known, when the learning packages are prepared. If the development of materials is dependent on the kind of audience in mind, then the characteristics of that audience need to be clear. The success of the package is determined, to a large extent, on predicting and understanding the kind of audience undertaking the program. Is the course being prepared for some mythical, typical student, thereby effectively disenfranchising all others, or is it aiming to be inclusive, providing for a wide range of people from varying backgrounds? Though this is an issue for all modes of delivery, it is of particular importance in open and distance education because the teaching processes are separated from the learning experiences in time and often also in place. Conventional settings have the potential, even if it is seldom realized, for negotiation of the content and teaching method to occur at the point of learning. Secondly, in the vast majority of cases, the primary delivery of the course is through written language rather than spoken. This is a major difference which has important implications for the design and delivery of curricula. Thirdly, students may have relatively limited access to some texts which have the potential to contribute significantly to their education. This is the case for some printed forms of information, particularly periodicals, which generally are not available for loan. There is also limited access to spoken texts, particularly informal conversations with other students involved in the course. Though the importance of these texts is often discounted because they appear only tangentially related to the delivery of the content, it will be argued later that they are part of the wider web of texts which students may find a useful resource. The consideration of language in open and distance education so far has focused on the need for consideration of both the broad and specific socio-cultural aspects as well as the textual histories of the participants. We now include another layer in the consideration, the notion of discourse. Discourse. Participants in any language encounter are able to communicate only if they can draw on common perspectives from their socio-cultural and textual backgrounds. These perspectives are part of complex networks of understandings and values which have their outworking in generalized sets of social practices and which are known as social institutions. Individual linguistic encounters are, therefore, not events in isolation. They can only be understood in relation to much broader cultural and social factors, particularly the social practices of which they are a part. There are many social institutions within society: education, the family, the justice system, politics, the conservation movement, sexism, racism, religion, authority, feminism, nationalism, healthcare, to name just a few. Each has an identified territory, although institutions are always trying to colonize other areas, as Kress, 1985, page 7, points out, and each has its own distinct ways of talking about this territory. Kress, 1985, page 7, defines these systematically organized sets of statements which give expression to the meanings and values of an institution as discourses. Discourses include the texts themselves as well as the social processes which produce the text and enable its interpretation. Fairclough, 1989, page 25. Texts comprise particular lexical items, content words such as teacher, school, or discipline, and grammatical items, relational words such as in, is, or they. Together they produce patterns of language which are identifiable as giving expression to the meaning and social practices of a particular institution. Within an institution, there is a range of forms of expression associated with social practices. For example, in tertiary education, enrollment, lectures, teaching packages, informal conversation, orientation camps and programs, and staff development activities are all part of the social practice. Each has a recognizable form of language, as well as other activities, as part of the social practice. Language issues in social practice. The language in these practices is a complex issue. Firstly, the discourse identifies particular roles and their appropriate language with specific participants. As part of learning the language in a culture, the range of roles and the language associated with those roles are also learned. This makes it possible to move between roles, for example, to be a teacher in one context and a student in another. Secondly, a text always consists of a number of overlapping and intersecting discourses. The ideas are often in conflict. Indeed, the task of the text is often to resolve or suppress the conflicting discourses. Kress maintains, 1985, page 12, that the difference between and within discourses is the motor that produces texts. Differences in power, knowledge, information, age, class, and gender are particularly relevant to the institution of education. To understand text in this way is to see the production and interpretation of texts as political endeavor. The point here is that the communication is not neutral. Texts are arenas for exercising power within social relationships. Wallace, 1992, page 60, identifies these two aspects as propositional knowledge about the topic and ideological assumptions about the social relations and differences in power. Though the propositional knowledge is often the focus of educational activity, it is always accompanied by the ideological aspects which arise out of value positions of the various discourses operating. In educational contexts, this is a crucial point. To really understand what is occurring in the text, then we need to consider more than just the propositional aspects. We also need to consider the ideological aspects of the exchange. Language is, then, one very powerful means of constructing and maintaining power differentials in society. Fairclough, 1989, page 1, maintains that there is widespread underestimation of the significance of language in the production, maintenance, and change of social relations of power. These complex perspectives are coded in the forms of language used. They include aspects such as the status of individuals indicated by such issues as who has the power to initiate, terminate or interrupt the exchange, what counts as valid knowledge and how knowledge is validated. For open and distance education, issues fall into two categories. Firstly, there are considerations about being successful within the complexity of these intersecting and competing discourses. Secondly, there are considerations about the ideology which comes packaged, invisibly, with the propositional aspects of the topic under consideration. Though these are fundamentally related, we will now consider each of these in turn. Learning to be successful in the discourses of open and distance education. One of the great attractions of open and distance education is its presumed capacity to increase access and equity by removing some of the barriers to participation, such as attendance. There is an assumption that this increased access will result in increased success for those traditionally not involved in higher education. Indeed, the Australian government has recently established the Open Learning Agency, which uses distance delivery methods to increase access to tertiary study. Though the importance of enhancing access is acknowledged, it is argued here that success is determined by a great deal more than access. Success will only occur if students learn to operate within the discourses of open and distance education. Kress, 1985, page 1, points out that communicating in an educational context is similar to any other social situation. A participant must learn to operate within the discourses at work in the spoken or written text of the field. In a real sense, it is not possible to operate as an individual. All participants, whether they are engaged in distance education or conventional face-to-face learning situations, are located in a network of social relations, in specific places in a social structure, Kress.1985, p.5. Membership within this network requires participants to act in particular ways if they are to be successful. The various discourses are not evenly distributed throughout society. Access to them is a matter of personal history. Kress, 1985, p. al. makes the point. For any member of a social group, discursive multiplicity, contestation, and difference is both a description of their history and an account of their present social position at any moment. The individual's history is composed of the experience of a range of discourses, passing through the intimate relations of the family and its discourses of authority, gender, morality, religion, politics, into school and its discourses of knowledge, science, authority, aesthetics, to work and adulthood. The discursive history of each individual therefore bears the traces of the discourses associated with the social places which that individual has occupied and experienced. These form, like sedimentary layers, the linguistic experience and potential of the speaker. It can be seen how individuals from similar positions, with similar social histories, have significantly similar linguistic experiences and therefore have quite similar forms of language available to them. At the same time, to the extent that discursive histories of individuals differ, a situation more likely than that of total congruence for many members of social groups, their experience of language, their positioning towards the linguistic system, differ. Added to this is the present social position of an individual, depending on their place in social institutions, work, profession, leisure, family, political affiliation, sexual relations, their present experiences of discourses will differ. Successful participation in social situations, including education, is determined to a significant extent on whether the language demands of the situation are met. Varying discursive history is, therefore, a significant issue in education. Because certain sectors of the community having less familiarity with, or access to, the discourses of the institution of education are in a less favorable position to succeed. Access in education must therefore be concerned as much with providing opportunities for learning the appropriate discourses as it is with flexible delivery and special entry provisions. Christie, 1985, page 23, goes so far as to say that children's, and arguably adults, as well, failure educationally is frequently because they function with different understandings and perceptions from those of their teachers, and thus use language differently. We learn language in order to mean. How we mean is very much a matter of experience and opportunity, a matter of the kind of discourse we have learned to handle and of the associated values and behavior we have learned to control. Ideological considerations. Though it is clear that those enrolling in courses of study are concerned with the propositional content, that is, the topic, it is also clear that this content comes organized around an ideological framework, that is, the social relations and differences in power. Disentangling the two is not possible. There are particular issues here for all non-dominant social groups, particularly those based on gender, race and class. In the context of specific propositional knowledge, particular social values are implicitly promoted. It is the implicit nature of this that is the concern. For example, in a subject such as management, to what extent are the principles based on Western, male and middle-class perspectives of the world? How would the body of knowledge be different if it were to be seriously inclusive of the positions of other social groups? The issue here is not merely one of the lesser likelihood of success of students from outside the dominant groups. Rather, it is the construction and maintenance of particular value positions in silent, unproblematic ways. These values have their outworking in certain kinds of social action which devalue or undervalue the contributions and perspectives of the less dominant groups. Though this is an issue for all education, courses delivered by open and distance methods are particularly problematic. The highly industrialized nature of the processes, including the potential for wide distribution, means that courses can be delivered to large numbers of people over geographically dispersed area. Across national and cultural boundaries, there are particular issues for cross-cultural contexts where learning packages developed for Western situations are seen as efficient ways of educating large numbers of people in non-Western countries. Guy 1990. Wallace, 1992, p. 61, argues that students need to be specifically and explicitly guided through the ideological context as well as the propositional knowledge of the discourses. The purpose of this is to make the value positions visible and problematic so that students see the potential for reconstruction on the basis of other value positions. This kind of ideological consideration, known as the critical approach, is widely accepted across all education sectors and modes of delivery. Fairclough 1992, Brookfield 1987, Evans. However, no matter how much individuals may ascribe to this philosophy, there comes a point, ultimately assessment, where it collapses. The reality is that the power differentials between students and teaching staff are difficult to change because they are part of very stable institutional networks which are embedded in and dependent on other social practices. It is not just the personal preference of individual academic staff which keeps the power differential in place or can remove it. It is the entire weight of the social institution of education and its place in wider society, which is realized in individual institutional policy and practice. Kim Mees, in Mudra 1991, page 21, Ellsworth, 1991, and Allen, 1992, bring interesting perspectives to this debate. Reading position. One of the major considerations in a critical approach is the notion of reading position. Because discourses are ways of talking about the world from particular value perspectives, the reader or listener is always positioned by the text. Kress 1985. Page 33. There is an implied, ideal, subject in mind when the text is produced, and the reader or listener is constrained by the text to take up that position. Induction into a field of study also entails induction into the subject positions of the field. In sexist discourse, for example, women are positioned as inferior to men. In racist discourse, certain racial groups are positioned as inferior to other, and in educational discourse, teachers are positioned as the knowers, and students as those needing to know. Teachers have a particular responsibility in this respect. Since there are no neutral discourses, it is important for teachers to be open about the ideology driving the discourses in their field, and to consciously critique them with respect to the range of social and cultural perspectives. Clearly locating the speaking position within the range of possible positions which exist is important to provide a balanced perspective. Readers and listeners are not competent to take up the position presented in a text. With these understandings of discourse in mind, two issues, critical field literacy and general academic discourses, will now be considered. Critical field literacy. It has been argued so far that language plays a fundamental role in learning a field of study, and that one aspect of the language is the value positions particular to the field. A field of study is not neutral, it consists of competing discourses which reflect varying beliefs and values. An example of this is the topic of land management. Depending on the field in which it is located, real estate, environmental management, Aboriginal studies, agricultural science, it will have widely divergent positions on issues such as the major concepts for consideration, notions of validity, the accepted authorities, and best practice. These differences will be seen in the language used to teach the topic within each field. These include the specific lexical elements and grammatical relationships, ways of expressing the power relationship between participants and the appropriate generic forms, patterns of larger texts, used in the field. In the above example, oral forms may predominate in some contexts and written forms in others. Learning a particular subject or field, then, needs to include learning the range of language competencies specific to that field. The ideas of a field cannot be separated from the language which constructs it. To learn about a field is to learn the language of the field. This involves an induction into the discourses, both propositional and ideological aspects, that operate within the field and includes a wide range of language experiences from very informal conversation to highly controlled written language. Learning a field is, therefore, a critical activity. That is, it involves necessarily the processes of critique. The varying ideological aspects of the field need to be considered explicitly so that students can understand the issue from varying perspectives, including the values that support them, both internal and external to their field. The aim is towards what might be called critical field literacy, a critical knowledge of the ideas of the field and the ways in which that particular field expresses those ideas. Being able to produce and interpret texts in a particular field depends on knowing how to hear and speak, read, and write within the discourses of the field, and to do this in ways which take into account, and perhaps challenge, the ideological basis of those ideas. General academic discourses. Being a student or a teacher in an educational institution involves more than knowledge of the field being studied. The more general academic discourses implicit in any institutional context are an issue. For students, this is not a minor matter. Learning how the system works involves acquiring a great deal of information about the administration of the educational environment, using resources such as the library and computer, how to relate to the various staff, and how to think, write and speak in ways appropriate to the particular educational setting. Students gain these kinds of understanding in a number of ways. Many have access through the day-to-day contact with friends, including fellow students, colleagues and family who have been students in similar programs or educational institutions. In on-campus situations, much of this is not taught in systematic ways, but is picked up as part of the informal interaction which occurs, particularly among students. For distance education students, these issues can be a particular problem. Being separated from the student body means one major source of information is not available. It is important, therefore, that the general academic discourses, including the roles associated with them, be addressed explicitly. In open and distance education contexts, this is usually achieved through the provision of clear statements, for example, academic expectations, and the provision of specific resources, for example, support systems, and information on how to access them. These issues are often dealt with by way of pre-entry counseling packages, orientation packages and programs, study skills information, handbooks and staff directories, academic counseling facilities, residentials and school camps. In open and distance education, there is an added level of complexity. The usual understanding about being a student is based on the face-to-face experience. By far the majority of students have had their first and most extensive educational experiences face-to-face. The expectations are known, to some extent at least, and the language skills already developed are aligned with the face-to-face situational context. In a very real sense, open or distance students need to learn the ways, including the linguistic skills, to operate effectively. Linguistic issues in open and distance education. There are two major linguistic issues here: the move from spoken to written language as the primary form of delivery, and the linguistic implications of the change from a group to an individual student context. The first of these, the differences between spoken and written language, includes the characteristics of spoken and written forms of language such as the level of abstraction and the potential for spontaneity, immediacy, retrievability and reflection. There are significant implications for teaching and learning because the forms vary in their potential to construct learning experiences. These characteristics have been dealt with in some detail. Individual context of the student. At this point, we want to focus on the second issue, the individual context of the student and the implications this may have in terms of the discourses available. The individual nature of open and distance learning results in some restriction in the discourses available to students. The most obvious of these is the limited access students have to each other. This is not to say all students see this limitation as a disadvantage. Indeed, some choose to study through open or distance courses because they see this restriction as a benefit. Student discourses have the potential to make contributions to the learning experience in respect to both propositional and ideological aspects. In terms of the propositional content, these discourses are another source of information about both the field of study and the general culture of the organization. But more importantly, this information is embedded in an ideological framework in which the power relations are symmetrical. Students can explore the various propositional aspects without a perceived potential for interference from asymmetrical student-teacher relationships. In open and distance education facilitation, this kind of interaction presents particular challenges. Circulating the names of students in particular subjects of courses, promoting student-run support groups, providing access to email facilities and organizing student-run teleconferences are examples of ways of facilitating this kind of interaction. Student associations also have a significant role to play in facilitating student-student dialogue. This theme is taken up by some papers in Voices of Experience Conference 1992, edited by Julie Hayford, in which a number of papers address a wide range of services that are being offered through student organizations. Like students, teachers need to grapple with two types of discourses. The discourse of the field is the area of expertise of the teacher and it needs to be constantly reconsidered as the knowledge base develops. It is a significant issue because of the enormous volumes of knowledge being created and the blurring of the traditional edges of the disciplines. This is an issue for all forms of educational delivery. Teaching discourse in open and distance education. With respect to the discourses of teaching, the issues are of a different order. The success of an educational experience depends to a significant extent on the teaching and learning arrangements organized by the teacher. Knowing the field is only part of the story. Being able to present the content of the field in ways that facilitate others to reconstruct the intended understandings is the other. Earlier in this section we considered at some length the semiotic school of communication. The background of the interpreter of the text was considered to be a fundamental consideration in communication. The view presented was that in teaching a particular field, there needs to be an explicit and critical presentation of the propositional and ideological aspects of the field. The task of teaching has, therefore, two foci. The topic being considered, the students with whom it is under consideration. That is, teachers teach a particular field to a specific group of students. The focus on students is a particular concern in the university sector within Australia where, traditionally, the field of study rather than proficiency in teaching has been the focus of lecturer expertise. There are indications that this is of widespread concern because of federal government initiatives on the quality of teaching and learning. More particularly, this is an issue in open and distance education across the sectors. Even for those with acknowledged expertise in face-to-face contexts, teaching at a distance introduces a new range of professional demands. Open and distance education experiences are dependent on particular forms of communication. The planning, preparation and presentation of the learning package, the specification of the content, the selection of the media, the identification of communication opportunities, the integration of learning activities into the text, and the determination of assessment, involve a wide range of language and communication skills, often requiring collaboration with editors, media experts and instructional designers, course developers, consultants. To ignore these highly specific demands on staff who teach in this way is to minimize both the expertise of those who are proficient, as well as the staff development issues for those who need to acquire these skills. In deciding on the teaching arrangements of a particular subject, there are a number of important considerations. The first is that there needs to be a clear understanding about the nature of the teaching enterprise. Teaching involves facilitating students to learn, to construct new understandings. It is geared to the neophyte, not the expert. Many distance educators in universities are justifiably accused of writing for their peers rather than the student group. A teaching package is constructed very differently from an article written for an expert audience. Secondly, the content to be taught needs to be identified and clarified. This is often a relatively simple matter because it is usually specified, to some extent, in a curriculum document and is the field of expertise of the teacher. Thirdly, the characteristics of the student body need to be identified. The topic is not just being taught, it is being taught to an identifiable cohort of people who have certain backgrounds and textual histories. Finally, the teaching and learning arrangements should be seen to reflect the two foci mentioned above. The topic under consideration and the students to whom it is being taught. The discourses of the field of study and the teaching discourse are intertwined to form the text. The inclusion of the pedagogical considerations influence the text in a number of fundamental ways. Holmberg 1989, page 14. The characteristics of the audience become a major influence on the organization of the text. Firstly, there is an explicit effort to relate the new knowledge to the student group, gender, race, class, and their educational experiences. The flow of the document is carried as much by the needs of the student body as the demands of the field. In this respect, The order of the presentation of ideas may change from group to group, or particular devices such as exercises and reflections may be included to assist the reader to make the intended connections. Secondly, intertextuality is an important consideration. The relationship of the current study to other texts in the field needs to be clearly articulated. Wallace 1992. p. 67, Halliday 1985, page 47. What texts, either written or spoken, about the field are being a student are assumed? Is it expected that students will have ready access to particular written texts such as journals or encyclopedias? Is the ideological terrain of the written texts in the field clearly identified? Are the assumed texts identified so that students can access them if they need to reconsider them? Are there clear pathways into the wider field and systematic guidance for students to extend their learning by pursuing areas of interest? Thirdly, the language becomes more personal. In teaching, learning situations, the people involved are given some prominence in the text by making direct reference to them. Finally, the language tends to become more like spoken language, much more accessible and informal. Though the above principles are acknowledged in the distance education literature, Evans, 1989, laments the lack of consideration generally for such pedagogical issues. Instead, he claims, the discourse of the field dominates. Conclusion. The position of this paper is that distance education is a social practice and that language is integral to that practice. In order to improve practice, it is necessary to understand how language contributes to the construction of the educational experience. Firstly, it was argued that the most useful way of understanding education is based on a semiotic view of communication, what Christie, 1985, page 29, calls sociolinguistic theory of learning. Language has a particular role in the education process because it is through language that the meanings fundamental to the learning activity are constructed, Christie 1990. Page 8. That is, the most useful way to understand learning in any mode is by the active reconstruction of the mokago by the receiver rather than by the transmission of messages. The reconstruction of meaning is fundamentally linked to the context in which the language occurs and to other texts on which the language draws. Secondly, the point was made that the context out of which the text emerges is not neutral. The social and cultural values of the context are encoded in the language of the text. These social values are not haphazard but systematically organized according to particular patterns of knowledge and relationships. These are referred to as social institutions. Social institutions express meaning in specific ways known as discourses. Making meaning, either producing or interpreting texts, in a particular social situation depends on being able to operate within these discourses. Familiarity with the various discourses is not evenly distributed throughout the population and depends on the discursive history of the individual. This raises issues of access and success as well as other ideologically based concerns. Thirdly, teaching and learning was discussed with respect to the discourses with which students and teachers need to be familiar in order to be successful participants in the social practices of open and distance education. This includes the specific consideration of propositional and ideological aspects of the field-specific discourses as well as the more general academic discourses. Finally, the importance of teaching discourses in the construction of the learning experience was advocated. Two teaching and learning foci were identified, considerations of the field and considerations of the student. To ignore the cultural, social, and textual considerations of the students is to put in jeopardy the likely success of particular groups of students. It is likely that these students will arrive at quite different interpretations of the educational texts than the one intended by the producer, teacher, of the text. This has some major, short-term and potentially long-term, consequences. Failure to gain a particular qualification may well result in exclusion from a particular sector of society, with all the social implications that exclusion brings. Students are particularly vulnerable in this regard because of the somewhat powerless position they occupy in the educational discourse. Thank you.